thank you all for coming today, and welcome to Vanderbilt University for this exciting program. And what better way to start our discussion than that brief video? It really shows the critical role that the great research universities play in economic development, in the American dream, and in driving so much of what this great nation stands for: innovation, entrepreneurship, efficiency. There is no question that these are times of enormous challenge. We have fiscal challenges, we have strong political differences, yet there are incredible opportunities, and I, for one, am always an optimist because I see every day the difference that education, research, discovery makes on our local community and certainly our great nation. I don't think for all the differences that there's ever been a greater awareness of the role that education and research and discovery play in the American economy, in the American dream. I also believe that there has never been a time, and it's represented here, where all the important stakeholders, local leaders, state leaders, regional leaders, private enterprise, community college presidents, medical school deans, and chancellors and presidents of American research universities are eager for better partnerships across the board. So we are aware of all the challenges we have, but I think there are great things ahead for education and for research, and certainly for our state and our local economy. Now, if we walk across any college campus, or certainly walk across a great research university, the change, the pace of change, and the scientific breakthroughs are simply astounding. And everyone is coming to work every day because they have as their goal, oh, I'd love to get another paper in Nature. I'd love to get another paper in Science. I'd love to be a National Academy member, but I'm really here to cure cancer. I'm really here to develop an alternative form of energy. I'm really here so that a quadriplegic who has never been able to walk can walk in a suit that has been designed on a college campus. So we are at an inflection point, but the energy, the focus, and the breakthroughs are astounding. We are seeing, in a very short period of time, from the decoding of the human genome that took computers probably to fill this room and many others, the use of that genetic information every day in the development of personalized medicine. We are seeing every day research on alternative forms of energy. Can nanoscience, can nanodots be used to generate efficient, clean, white light? Can smart algae be developed to replace other sources of energy? We and so many others are looking at what I consider America's greatest challenge, which is, can we build an effective, efficient, research, science-based system of healthcare, one that is based on science, best care, and uses bioinformatics, software engineering to bring healthcare costs down and yet improve the quality of care. We heard Bill Frist say, the American dream. There are two streets through which the American dream always passes. It's Main Street and it's University Avenue. And those things have always come together. Our challenge now is Main Street, University Avenue, the state capitol, the United States Capitol, the corporate suite, small businesses. Can we all work together respecting the autonomy that we all have, knowing that top-down solutions do not work, but yet work together in a new dynamic way to create the 21st century? I am very fortunate here to say that one of our senators and one of our representatives, Senator Lamar Alexander and Representative Bart Gordon, really were the driving force behind this study that we're going to focus on today. And they really said, well, America's competitiveness rests on research and development. How are we doing? Let's take our temperature. Let's give ourselves a grade. They asked the National Academies of Sciences to developed this report specifically action-oriented, list-driven. What are the top 10 actions that Congress, the federal government, state governments, research universities, and others can take to assure the ability of the American Research University to maintain excellence in research and doctoral education needed to help the United States compete, prosper, and achieve goals for health, energy, the environment, and security in the global community of the 21st century. Every day we come to work, that's our writ, that's our charge, and that's what we believe we must do. Could we have a better, more Tennessee group to participate in this? I doubt it. This committee that produced this report was chaired by Chad Holliday and included Senator Frist. They went out, they held numerous meetings, they listened to various stakeholders. They then produced this report, Research Universities and the Future of America, published in June 2012. Now, this report tells us much of what we already know. Federal support for research is critical. Federal support for training programs is essential. The long-term success is contingent on building those partnerships between the public, the private sectors, and all of the stakeholders. But we need to be looking for better ways to collaborate. Not, this is how I do things, that's how you do things, sorry, we can't dance. Let's put aside those differences and let's find what's in common and move forward. It calls on states and governors who have a very challenging time. I tell the governor his job is almost as hard as mine. But it calls on them to commit to the research institutions, to take a step back and say, for all of the things that I have to juggle and all of the fiscal challenges that I have, is a commitment to the research university model one that will drive the long-term goals and the long-term interests of our state, public and private. We need to, as I said, encourage those partnerships between private industry. And it calls on universities to be reflective and to say, how do we interact with private industry? What is our technology transfer operation like? What is the culture on our campus of working with private enterprise? There are so many other great institutions that have joined us today: the University of Tennessee, Tennessee State University, University of Alabama, University of Kentucky, Fisk University, Meharry Medical College, Oak Ridge National Lab, St. Jude's, just to mention a few. And when you think of that lineup and what can be done, you get so much of a sense of the interest and the passion and the possibilities. We're working with industry partners all the time to build these research opportunities. On our own campus, we went through some soul searching about 5 years ago, and we said, how are we interacting with private enterprise? And we said, not very well, not very well. And so what we did was we kind of cleaned out the Augean stables, and we said, we're going to build our technology transfer office from the bottom up. Bottom up. We're going to get experts in fields, and we're going to commit ourselves to this partnership. I'm very proud, if you keep track of things, that our new leader, Alan Bentley, we've done a number of important drug discovery ideas. We have our own Institute for Drug Discovery that we've funded. We've announced partnerships with Johnson & Johnson, Bristol Myers Squibb, and just yesterday, a nice little partnership, congratulations to Dean Balzer, Vice Chancellor Balzer, with AstraZeneca. About 100 yards from here, you'll soon see ground broken on a new interdisciplinary science, engineering, applied science, technology transfer, entrepreneurship center. That building will go up across the street from a very long home run in our baseball field. So we are seeing this as our primary responsibility. You'll soon hear an announcement from Vice Chancellor Balzer that we are going to double the size of our MD PhD program, physician scientists. We want the largest physician science program in the country, and that will be tuition free for the whole time that that training occurs. So we want to be great partners. I think I speak for Jimmy and all of my colleagues that that's what we're here for. I think if you look, as Chad said in the video, at our success over time, the creation of the great land-grant universities, during the Civil War, World War II, coming out of World War II and saying, we need to commit ourselves to science and research and discovery. That's the future. We have been the leader by any measure. And I always encourage you, when you look at the Nobel Prizes that come out, and then look at them 100 years ago, where were they being granted? And they're still largely American Nobel Prizes. And we have to take great pride in that. But those prizes reflect probably 20 years of past work. So how do we make sure that we continue to be a leader? I was on the phone yesterday with a writer from Science Magazine, and we were talking about this forum. We were talking about the future. And he said to me, as he probably should have, why does it matter if America is the leader? He said, why don't, other countries have been satellite development areas for us. Maybe we'll just be a satellite development area as time goes on. Well, of course, my national pride made me stand up in my chair, and I said to him, first of all, my responsibilities and our responsibilities run in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee, in Tennessee, and in America, out in concentric circles. Secondly, I said, what is most important to remember about American research is it's on the bedrock of American freedoms, on American liberty. Why is that wrong? Why doesn't that work? What about this way of doing things? In many countries still, those are not comfortable questions. And so what is the future research and what is the freedom of inquiry that comes with it? And creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship are hand in hand with those values. I know that you are very, very busy, and I want to get to this panel very quickly, and we have a lot of octane in the room. I mean, this, as I was talking to the group before, we want a to-do list. We want an set of action items. We want timelines on how we're going to get there. So without any further ado, let me kind of introduce our very distinguished panel. Now, this could take the whole time, so because each of these individuals has a truckload full of honors and award and distinguished service. Bill Haslam joins us today, our governor. I can't tell you how fortunate we are to have in this state such a thoughtful, progressive, and practical leader. He focuses on three things, I think. I think the first thing is probably jobs, 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 as I do, but jobs and economic development, education and workforce development. And how do we do that, importantly, with prudent fiscal leadership? Those things do go together. Those things do go together. We have an incredible quality of life. It is a dream to recruit to Nashville and Tennessee because of the governor's leadership. He has been active in education. You saw him yesterday in discussion on K through 12 education, the foundation of what we all do, affordability, access, and quality programs. He is committed to raising the bar in every way to make our state the most attractive state, not only in the Southeast, but in the nation, for people to come and be great, productive citizens. Thank you, Governor, for joining us. Now, I'm also delighted to introduce our senior senator, Lamar Alexander, who is one of our most distinguished alums. I might also add that I think it was less than 2 years ago that we inducted Lamar into the Vanderbilt Athletic Hall of Fame in this very room. So he is a very, and I have to joke, Lamar was on a relay team. He knows how to pick really good roommate. And even though he did not run fourth, he always told me, I was the anchor on that team. So what can we say about this incredible citizen of Tennessee and graduate of Vanderbilt? Secretary of Education, governor, United States Senator, led the publication of this report, a critical voice, a persuasive voice in the Senate about vital issues, strengthening our education systems, managing our healthcare programs, protecting our environment, and easing the regulatory burdens on some of our biggest businesses in America, which are our research universities. Elected 3 times by his peers to be in the Senate Republican Conference, this leader has said, "I need to do more," and he has pledged to work hard in our Senate for years to come to engage and to press forward on these critical issues. I turn now to one of our faculty members, the Honorable William Frist. We're proud to have Billy here as a professor of cardiac surgery and just all-around professor in the business school and so many other areas, long and distinguished association with Vanderbilt, director of our first multi-organ transplant center, represented the state of Tennessee in 12 years in the Senate, elected majority leader. There, he led efforts to pass a prescription drug program and funding to combat HIV/AIDS, both in U.S. and around the globe. And that effort has made a tremendous difference in treatment and care of that disease. Today, we are lucky that he devotes his enormous talents and incredible energy to healthcare reform, heart transplantation science, global health policy, health disparities, economic development in low countries, through medical mission work around the world. He served on this report, and he has told me in numerous conversations that his gaze is global, but his heart is in Tennessee, in transforming the economy of this great state. And last but not least, I have to talk about our good friend Chad Holliday. Chad has been serving as the CEO and chair. He was serving as CEO and chairman of DuPont. He recently has taken a foray into the banking world as chairman of Bank of America, which we know is very light lifting. And he is a graduate of the great University of Tennessee, but we will claim him also as a member of our faculty, executive in residence at the Owen School of Business. He served as chair of this committee that wrote the National Academy's report. So I want to thank Governor Haslam. I want to thank Senator Alexander, Senator Frist, and Chad for coming. So with that, I'm going to sit down, and what I would like to do is to have, I think we'll start with the governor. I'm going to be turning it over to you, give you each 5 to 7 minutes to react to this report and to give us your thoughts about where we should be going. And I will be a very strict timekeeper, despite my low rank among this distinguished group.
Well, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you all for being here. This room is full of distinguished people, the folks up here, and Director Oak Ridge National Lab, Chancellor UTK. I could go on and on, but there are 3 folks that stand out to me. They will all vote on my budget here in several weeks, and I want to make certain I recognize them. First of all, the Speaker of the House. There might be a better Speaker of the House somewhere in the country, but I have no idea who it would be because Beth Harwell is terrific. She's from right here in Nashville. Beth, thank you for joining us. The minority leader of the House is with us as well, Craig Fitzhugh from Ripley, Tennessee, and Craig has been actively engaged in higher education and other issues, all focused again on job creation. Craig, thank you for being with us. And Mark White, who I think the Speaker has kind of delegated to work intensively on how do we generate more jobs out of the research that is happening in Tennessee. Mark is from Memphis, and I know I saw him walk in somewhere, but Mark is back here and is also the chairman of the subcommittee for education. So thanks all 3 of you for being here. I'll just make 3 or 4 real quick points, and then I'll turn it over to Lamar. I think the National Academy of Science got it right. Innovation has been the distinguishing factor of our economy for the last at least decade, and that's true nationally, and it's true in the state of Tennessee. And our challenge is how do we take that and accelerate that? I think the second point I would make is this. I think we have to be intentional about maximizing our assets, and I'm primarily speaking as the governor of Tennessee now. Obviously, that holds true on a national basis as well, but as the governor of Tennessee, I think we have a particular challenge there. Here's a few of the statistics. Tennessee has had over $2.5 billion of federal R&D annually, ranking us number 8 in the country. Okay, so that's a really, really impressive number. The flip side of that is in 2010, we had only 6 startups based on technology from research institutions that were created in Tennessee. And Tennessee companies won only 0.7%, that's not 7%, that's 0.7% of the nation's Small Business Innovation Awards. That's the primary federal government research and development award for small business. Obviously, we have about 2% of the population in the country, but we got 0.7% of the nation's small business awards. So the question is, what are we doing about it? We've met repeatedly with the research institutions in the state to encourage technology transfer. We established Launch Tennessee, a public-private partnership focused on growing entrepreneurship and innovation back this past May. Launch Tennessee is doing everything from offering grant writing assistance to entrepreneur, inventor, investor meetings, and then working with the various technology transfer offices, many of who are represented here today. So the quick results, and it's very quick, but we had 24 university startups in 2012 alone. That's up 70% from 2011, 200% from 2010, and over 380 patent applications in 2012, again, up 50% from 2011. So the second point I would make is we have to be very intentional that just getting the dollars is not the key. It's about producing the results. I think the third point I would make is that to truly allow colleges and universities to succeed in this, our job in government is to streamline the process and to get out of their way as much as possible. Obviously, we have stewardship responsibilities when federal or state dollars are involved, but our primary mission, I think, is to find the right people, find the right investments, make certain that they're focused, hold them accountable, and then get out of their way. And I think the National Academy of Science report emphasized the importance of that. I think that's maybe one of the most important, if not the most important recommendation that they provided, and something we'll continue to fight for. The fourth thing I'd make a point is just a personal one here. How do we apply that? As I mentioned when I started this, we'll be presenting our budget here in 12 more days. And I think you'll see a continued focus on higher education. We take our partnerships with our higher ed institutions seriously in Tennessee. And over a period of time, those dollars have been cut. It's pretty easy. Senator Alexander could explain it a lot quicker than I could, but as more federal and state dollars have gone to Medicaid, less money has gone to higher education. And we're doing everything we can to reverse that trend and try to get those dollars back into higher education for teaching and research purposes. I think the final point I'd make is this. It is a brave new world anytime we talk about higher education. It has changed. We call it the new normal. And I'm pleased that our partners in higher ed across the state understand that. And so whether it's in classroom learning or research, the ability to tie into your direct objective and to be outcome focused rather than input based, I think will drive everything from research to how we fund seats in classrooms. And like I said, that's why I welcome the partnership of the institutions represented here today. Thank you, Chancellor.
Thanks, Nick. Bill Haslam and Bill Frist are precisely the kind of people that we should be recruiting to serve in public life. Chad Holliday is one of the most distinguished graduates of the University of Tennessee, and Nick, we're proud of you and Vanderbilt and your leadership here. What I learned at Vanderbilt was even if you're not the fastest guy on the campus, if you find three really speedy guys and manage to carry the baton from the first one to the third one, you might even set a record, which is a pretty good rule of life. Maybe the most recent exciting story of what research and innovation has meant to America is the story of unconventional gas. Now, this natural gas from shale was 1% of our natural gas a few years ago. It's 25%. A couple of years ago, it may be 50%. In another 20 years, it's providing for our country suddenly a new source of cheap, relatively clean energy at about 1/4 or 1/5 the cost of that companies would pay in Europe or Asia, which means chemical companies are moving back to our country and with many other ramifications. That came partly because of our private ownership of land here, our entrepreneurial spirit, but even the drillers who successfully did it gave a lot of credit to the Department of Energy for their research and development project and to Sandia Laboratory for its invention of 3D mapping. In other words, it wouldn't have happened without government-sponsored research. And you can say that about so many things, about the internet, about nuclear power, about the human genome, about stealth, about semiconductors. Nick said the Science magazine guy asked him a question, why is it so important here? Well, one reason is because we produce in the United States about 25% of all the wealth every year for just 5% of the people. And probably the main reason we've been able to do that is because we lead the world in innovation. Now, knowing that, I remember vividly sitting in a budget committee in the Senate at the end of a long day, getting increasingly depressed at what I call the big squeeze. Medicaid, Medicare, health care, entitlements, and debt squeezing out money for higher education, innovation, and research. And I remember walking down the National Academy of Sciences and saying, I think if you'll tell us 10 things we should do in priority order, we'll probably do them. And with Bill Frist's leadership, the Senate after a while did that. That's what we call America Competes. And we did a number of things, but it was a path forward in terms of how we could reassert our competitive spirit, called Rising Above the Gathering Storm. And among the things was a blueprint for doubling federal investment in innovation over a period of time. I've been watching that big squeeze for 30 years. When I used to have Bill's job, I would get down to the end of the budget process and I'd want to put some money into higher education, but Medicaid would take it. I even went to President Reagan 30 years ago and suggested the federal government take all of Medicaid, get it out of here, and let us have all of education, just some way that we could get more control over our own destiny. But to give you an example of what I mean by this big squeeze, people don't like to talk about this because we all know healthcare is important. We're at the center of the healthcare industry in America. Here, we're at one of the great medical universities. We all want money for healthcare, but here's what's going on. I mean, federal entitlement spending is going up at the rate of 3 or 4 times inflation. By 2025, that's not long, that's about 10 or 11, 12 years, 2025, all of the tax money that we collect will go to pay for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. That means there's nothing left for national laboratories at Oak Ridge, for Pell Grants for students, for national defense. There's zero left. All that money would have to be borrowed. That's where we're headed, and not very far away. That's the federal big squeeze. And even though we're borrowing at irresponsible amounts in Washington, still we've stretched out the funding for research so that it will now be around 2024, 25 before we reach the goals that we set with America Competes. The same thing happens in the state level. When I was governor, Medicaid was 8% of the state budget. When Phil Bredesen was governor, it got up to 33, I believe. Today, it's 25 or 6. That's 26%. Now think about that. Gone from 8 to 20. Now what's happened? 30 years ago, the state government paid 70% of your cost of going to the University of Tennessee. Today, it pays 30. That means the quality is not as high as it could be, and tuitions are higher than they should be. And it's not because the state doesn't want to do more, it's because they're getting squeezed by a federal program in which states pay a part of it. So until that's addressed, we can write pretty reports and say nice things and avoid the issue. But until you stop federal Medicaid squeezing of state tax dollars, you're going to have continuing reduced support for public higher education, and the great public research universities are going to be gone. Because there won't be sufficient state support to do it, or they'll be basically private universities. Now, briefly, and we can come back to any of this that you'd like to, there's still about $30 billion of federal dollars that go to colleges and universities. I've got a list from the various statistics gatherers in Washington about the $128 billion that the National Science Foundation says the federal government spends on research and development, with 30 of it to colleges and universities. And while they don't spend as much, industry spends even more. So still our country's committed to this. What I like about this report is it's specific, it's in priority order, just as we asked that it should be. It's not all about federal dollars. It focuses on productivity, George Romney said in the 1960s in Michigan to the big three car companies, nothing is more vulnerable than entrenched success. That's a good message to higher education in America, which is not just some of the best colleges in the world, but almost all of them. And there are plenty of things that can be done to make them more productive. For example, the former president of George Washington University says that he could save $10 or $15 million a year if he just had every student take one summer course. And $10 or $15 million a year, the way a chancellor looks at things, is $300 or $400 million on the endowment. Or that you could run 2 entire universities in the same facilities if they were properly scheduled, because universities are so inefficiently organized. I'm going to work with Senator Mikulski to try to go to work on the burdensome regulations. The stack of regulations for colleges and universities is twice as high as I am. I stood it up on the Senate floor one day when I voted against it. Autonomy is a concept that's not well understood in state legislatures. There's an interesting suggestion about faculty, about endowed chairs. That's a strategy that states also could use. Tennessee's done it. We've had 25 distinguished scientists at Oak Ridge, half funded by the federal government, half funded by the state. Governor Bredeson's done more. We had 100 chairs of excellence created here 30 years ago. It's about $250 million in endowment right now for the state universities. So both federal and state governments might be able to afford one-time spending for endowed chairs more easily than ongoing spending. We could stop wasting money on energy subsidies, such as the one for the extra $12 billion we just gave to wind turbines, and spend it instead on energy research. We only spend $5 billion a year on energy research. And finally, the recommendations on immigration are very commonsensible, and I hope we can address them this year. Chet Atkins used to say that you have to be mighty careful where you aim, because you're likely to get there. I hope that's true with this report. It's an excellent one.
Thank you, Lamar. Bill?
Thank you, Nick, and it is a great pleasure to be here, to be really in a home room that's very much at the heart of what Chad put together, or under his leadership came together as a report that emerged from this request from Congress in terms of 10 recommendations. And the recommendations all of you have on page 7, they are specific, and to have the opportunity to be in this room to engage in the discussions today with the broad range of business leaders, representatives of the research universities, people like Speaker Harwell, representing the state legislator and governors and the like, gives us a great opportunity to lead as Tennesseans addressing the problem, which I think Lamar really articulated very well, and that I'd like to extend the comments on. In 12 years, if we stay on the path that we're on today, we do have no money left over to be able to invest in sort of the good stuff of life, the stuff that grows the economy, the stuff that does create the American dream, the stuff that gives us a security of fulfillment in family responsibility and their future. The one way that we can reverse that, and we see it play out, Lamar, unfortunately, well, thank goodness for me, unfortunately for him, has to go back tomorrow, the next day, to address it, is to continue to debate on the debt and on the deficit and on spending and on taxes, something that we know is absolutely necessary. But no matter what happens and no matter what sort of appropriate compromise or roadmap is put forward, we still can't reverse without very specific action this trajectory that ultimately can destroy the greatness of America. The only thing that will do that, and it comes back to the report itself, is to grow the pie. Because we can cut and dice and slice and have arguments about tax cuts and what they're going to do and cut spending as much as we can to the bone. But at the end of the day, the only way to address this greatness of America, the American dream, our future global competitiveness is to grow the pie. And that is what the heart of the report is about, because it requires something that is political figures, and Bill has Lamar's old job and Lamar has my old job, and we work it politically and we hope that'll happen. At the end of the day, it's probably not going to be all this stuff. It is going to be the creativity of the American economy and business people and families and small business coming together to grow that pie and to create jobs. To do that in this globally competitive world where we do have China investing much more in terms of R&D, Europe at this stage waking up and investing much more than the United States as a percent of GDP in R&D, is this longer term thinking that we as political figures might do, but the immediacy and the intimacy of the American people is we got to have action now. And it kind of gets us away from that longer term thinking of growing the pie. The report stresses three things. Number one, talent. Number two, knowledge to create growth. And number three, innovation. And those three things are really what University of Tennessee and Vanderbilt and our great research universities are all about. In fact, that's primarily what they're all about. It's talent, getting the very best people in a community. And the community may be a country, it may be a state, it may be a Nashville, it may be a part of Nashville itself. But get the very best talent, individuals who are trained to work together to create as individuals with the ideas that must ultimately be executed on to grow the economy. Number two, the knowledge base itself, and I think Lamar commented on that with the whole energy revolution that has taken place that none of us imagined even 5 or 10 years ago, and it has to do with the technology and knowledge, both in terms of data and the creation of natural language and the knowledge that creates as you go forward. And then the third is innovation, which I think Bill mentioned, the governor mentioned, in terms of we got to have the innovation, but we also have to have the execution. We have to have the programs, and we can have lots of great ideas, but unless we execute, it's just not going to happen. The economy is not going to grow. The third recommendation in the report goes very much to the heart of strengthening partnerships in business. Chad and I wrote an article that pointed out that MIT, one university, has created 4,000 different businesses over a very short period of time through a very active, direct approach. An investment by a state, University of Alabama reported to us, for every dollar invested directly by the state is a $3 growth in the economy. I will close by really basically again stressing this long-term thinking that the report addresses so that we can encourage our policymakers both at the local level, with the mayor, at the state level, through people like Beth and the governor, and at the federal level. In 1990, out of a report very much like this came the Human Genome Project idea. It wasn't a 2-year plan or a 4-year plan. It was a 15-year collaborative approach between public and private sector, domestic and global, in fact, that said within 15 years, by 2005, we're going to figure out the phone book of what makes us our thumbprint, what makes us unique. 3 billion bits of information that we really didn't know how is it organized, something that nobody knew if we really could do, but we said 15 years and $3.5 billion. A long term, which had no direct financial impact, but we knew would have an impact itself. Well, indeed, and a lot of people don't believe very much in government these days and the efficiencies that can be seen within government, but not in 15 years, but in 13 years, the human genome was fully defined. Not only was it fully defined 2 years ahead of schedule, but it was defined not for around $4 billion, but it was about $2.8 billion, so under budget. The impact has been, and it's not just federal government, because 80% of these research dollars, of these federal dollars, flow down to the research institutions, where the talent and where the knowledge and where the innovation actually take place. The impact has been job creation and growing the economy. Right now, there are about 350 biomedical clinical trials underway today at the NIH, which will project to the future. For every $1 invested of the it was about $2.7 billion, for every $1 invested, $146 of growth in the economy have taken place over a 12-year period of time. A demonstration like the energy demonstration and example that Lamar gave, that a collaborative approach between the private sector, research universities, and our government, federal, state, and local, can have huge impact. Where today, many of you in this room are on warfarin or Coumadin, and there's a genetic test which tells us how much medicine to give you so that you won't bleed or have a stroke. Or if you need a stent placed later today, you'll go to Vanderbilt, and in your medical record, there'll be a genetic test based on the Human Genome Project, finished 2 years in advance, under budget, looking to the future. That genetic test will say whether you should be on Plavix or another drug. And if you're on the wrong drug, your chance of having clotting of that stent within the next 24 hours is much higher. Or if you're on tamoxifen for your breast cancer or on allopurinol, all of those practical implications from a product of our great research universities. This is the sort of story that needs to be told, that we need to build public support for. We have great examples from the past. The report outlines many more. If we follow these 10 recommendations, and we're very specific, which is the purpose of today, to go back and develop very specific recommendations, we can repeat this story again and again, grow the pie, grow the economy, and be able to invest in our research universities, in the things which make us truly unique in America, and at the same time, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the great entitlements that have made this country great as well.
Thank you, Bill. We just announced a new genetic test yesterday on childhood cancers, where 7% of those being treated have an adverse reaction to a common chemotherapy treatment. And we have that in our computer system and are trying to take care of as many young children as we can. Thank you. Keep telling the story. Chad?
Thanks very much. It's just an honor to be here today. I want to thank you all for coming. This is a very important session. Our committee has recommended that we go across the country with this message. We're having regional workshops. We had one in Pittsburgh. We're here today. We're going to Dallas. We're going to San Francisco. And we want to pull all that together, then go back to Lamar and his colleagues in Washington this fall and say, what did we learn from the people that are actually making things happen? So it's a critical session for us. Chancellor Cheek, thanks so much for coming. I think it's a great thing to see universities cooperating together. And it's a lot better now than it was last fall, I know, but this is good, so we'll be there. Let me answer kind of two questions for you. What did we find in our study? And then what were our recommendations? And the good news is we found the American university system is by far the best in the world. There are many different ranking categories, but we're at least 35 of the top 50. As we look around at other people trying to copy our model, we find it's very difficult. It's a unique DNA to us, and I'm sure they will get there. But our goal through these recommendations is when they get there, we want to be somewhere else. We want to be the next step farther in how we're making it happen, and I think that's certainly doable and very encouraging. I think Chuck Vest, the president of the National Academy of Engineering, said it best. He said, American research universities are a unique American invention. And I didn't understand that at first when we started the work, but I came to learn that this is very unique, the ecosystem that we have across these, and we've just got to utilize it better as we go forward. We started and said, well, how many research universities do we have? That is a very difficult question to answer. 60 that you'd say absolutely competing with anybody in the world, but there's 200 total. And our committee looked at, well, should we only focus on the 60? And we said, no. We think us be America, let's be entrepreneurial about this. And if one of those, this number 199 today, can break into the top 60, more power to them. It'll keep competition alive. And so our recommendations reflect that we want the entire 200 to be successful, or at least having a chance to be successful. Focusing on our recommendations, as Bill commented, they're in kind of three categories. One's the partnership. And when Lamar challenged us with this, he said, I want 10 recommendations, and only 5 can cost money. The other 5 have to be something you're going to do to make yourselves better. And he turned to the business people and said, you make sure those universities guys do that. And so we did, Lamar, as I think you see from the recommendations. But the unique federal partnership that was started during the Civil War, expanded after World War II, needs to be continued to strengthen, and I'm sure it will in the right point in time. The tie with the states is absolutely critical, and also the corporate tie. Now, coming from corporate America, let me tell you, you need to demand more of us, Bill and Lamar. Right now, from my DuPont experience, I'll come and I will look at all the great research, and I'll license the best, and we got pretty good licensors. We do pretty good deals. And then I'll take your very best graduates and hire them. But we have no skin in the game. you need to require us to put more investment in that. You need to think about tax laws that would require us to invest long-term with 10 years of research with Vanderbilt as you go forward. And I think there's some ways you can restructure that. I do believe this partnership is what's unique about how we make it work. I was trying to figure out what suit to wear this morning. Figuring out what tie to wear this morning was easy. You understand? But
I've almost got my sunglasses.
I couldn't resist. So, but this suit was an experimental suit. If you don't like it, that's okay. Technology is what's important. It was made from a plant in East Tennessee with primarily DuPont biotechnology, with a small grant from DOE, with a grant from the state of Tennessee, and in partnership with the University of Tennessee. And it's been around for a few years, but that same technology now is helping DuPont be one of the leaders in biotechnology across the world. And that little bit of help, but that cooperation with the state, the DOE, and the companies and universities together is unique. So I couldn't help but wear that today, and if you'd like to know where you can buy one, I'll let you know later. Second is productivity. Lamar talked about it. The amount of regulatory burden shocked me. And all of us from business that were a part of this committee were absolutely blown away with the duplications that there are of different agencies all requiring the same thing slightly different way. And so a university has to have multiple systems to feed that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I'm sure as we look at it closely, we can streamline that to a great extent. We also found that universities could be more productive. We have examples in the report of a university have done fundamental studies of how they buy and how they cooperate with each other. And I think that's very critical. So that's all a part of the self-help category. And finally, it's around talent. You know, one of the things we've seen, and as Lamar commented in the original Rising Above the Gathering Storm report, we bring great foreign students here, we educate them, they take our resources, and then we won't let them stay. And so there's got to be something around the visa program integration that's critical. So if we look at partnership to the next level, we take productivity where it can be, and we use that talent, we think we make a big difference. And thanks again for being here and part in the program.
Thank you so much, Chad. I think I'd like to open it up to questions. I certainly have questions, but you don't want to hear me asking the questions. So I think we have microphones up, and so I will encourage people to come out. You have these remarkable leaders up here who've written this report and are eager to learn. That's why we're here. So please go to the microphones. Yes.
Steve Porter.
And introduce yourself, of course.
Steve Porter. I've been in the States since '95. Came here with a company called Therapeutic Antibodies, which was bought by a British company. And some of you may have been investors in that effort, and formed a virtual drug development and worked in China for 6 years and still have activities there with drug development and watched them grow. But what I've observed, I also spent 8 years in academic medicine at Research Triangle Park and watched that effort grow to over hundreds, several hundred biotech companies. I don't know the count anymore. But the bottom line is what I saw there, what I saw in Ireland, what I've seen in Australia, what I'm seeing in China is this private-public partnership. And it worked and it didn't work. In Germany, we had 1,500 biotech companies. None of them really became entities besides toolkit companies, and then most of them failed. What I'm asking for the group here is, why aren't we duplicating some of the successful efforts of Research Triangle Park, where they took a good portion of their retirement fund and put it back into life sciences? Florida put $3 billion back into life sciences with the private-public partnerships. 1 or 2% of the entire state retirement fund was utilized. This has been discussed in this state for at least 15 years. Doesn't seem to get any traction, and that I understand and I can't figure out. Why aren't we taking those funds instead of always relying on central federal government? Look at the states. Look at the states like Texas and Tennessee that have rational tax structures, and take that largesse and put it back into the system. And in the clinical research arena, the government retirement fund in Canada is funding and buying through PE funds massive amounts of CROs, multi-billion-dollar investments in clinical research through contract research organizations. So why aren't we using some of that state monies with partnership with universities and with businesses, and then retain jobs in the state? And I've witnessed here, I mean, virtually 90% of our PhD graduates go to the West Coast or East Coast to get jobs. They need to stay here. And what I saw in Ireland, well, I had 3 companies in Ireland at one time, is they had a rational tax structure. They had a 10% business tax, 12%, 10% if you manufacture, 12% total tax on businesses. They offered me 69% of the entire cost of every employee I hired for 3 years, free electricity for 2 years, and all the milk I could drink. So, you know, there are economic policies that make sense. And that economy crashed because of the housing bubble that happened over there also. But that was a 10, 15% growth rate for 10 years because of the private-public partnership and a rational tax structure.
Governor, why don't you take a shot at that?
I'll do my
And
best.
I'll follow up.
I'll do my best.
Give a
I
little background.
hope I appreciate that. I do think we have a rational tax structure, which I think is the first piece. The second piece, in terms of investing, I think what you're saying, the state's pension money into more of these efforts, I think is a worthy thought. That the pension fund money in Tennessee is actually controlled by the treasurer, which is a separate constitutional office that I'm not responsible for, directly responsible for. That being said, I think I don't know enough to talk about the fiduciary responsibility there to say why we've decided to go there, why we haven't and others have, but I'll be glad to have, David Lillard's our treasurer, I'll be glad to have that conversation with him.
Bill, do you want to?
No, because I am familiar both with Ireland and in the investment world now, I've had the opportunity to speak a lot and travel since I left the United States Senate. And I do think that we have a lot to learn from other states and other communities. And I do think initiatives like Jeb Bush, who was here yesterday, when you look at what they've done around Orlando with a joint private state money and federal money, with a lot more participation from the private sector joining in, made about a $10 billion commitment, but in a very short period of time of 4 years in this Nona complex are going to revolutionize the economy for that whole Central Florida. Revolutionize the economy with a brand new medical school. The dean actually came from Vanderbilt, put up within 4 years a brand new Veterans Administration that will open up in about 6 months, a simulation laboratory that has come in from the outside, attracted Cisco to make a huge investment in terms of the infrastructure for the entire community. That is the sort of planning and coming together that we've not demonstrated in Tennessee. It's not their job, it's really more our job in the business community and probably the academic community than the political job. But we need to look to Austin and Charlotte and Research Triangle and Nona in Florida and the more historic, and I'm thinking in terms of biomedical, the more historic places like Houston who have done a much better job. It's a huge gap that we don't have here in Tennessee. And it's not just their job. I think it's much more the private sector leadership that's going to be required.
Nick, if I can, let me throw a little, let me come from another direction on this. If there's extra government money to spend, I'd spend it on research. I think that's the cleanest, best way to do it. You get into this, the second thing is to spend it on creating an environment in which all the things you described can happen. You get into a difficulty when you start having direct government incentives and funding for corporate enterprises. I mean, one might have said a few years ago it had been a good investment for the state retirement fund to invest in the solar industry, but it wouldn't look so good yesterday. And the employees might not have appreciated the state treasurer who did it. It's better to risk the state tax dollars on that rather than it is the employee funds. It's better to use the state tax dollars to create 100 chairs of excellence or 25 centers of excellence, or as Governor Bredesen did, governor's chairs at Oak Ridge, or I think all that's good. But Governor Haslam must be approached every day by some business that wants some money to help defray their costs because they're making a real good contribution to the state. And some of them have been here 100 years, and some of them are shopping around to see where they can come. So I would like to see the federal and the state government significantly increase funding for research. And some of that money in tight times, I think, will come from subsidies to specific industries. Also, other countries in the world haven't always been successful when they've gotten too mixed up with private sectors. I mean, China is completely different. If you want to do what we did with America Competes in China, Mr. Hu, Mr. Wu just call everybody down to the Great Hall and say, this is what we're going to do for the next 5 years, and so they do it. We're a little more complicated. You know, we have to go through a democratic process. Japan, I remember 30 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, well, they've got the business all tied up with the car companies, and why don't we do more of that? That hadn't worked out so well for them. We've done better than they have with our more separate entrepreneurial structures. So I think, number one, research. Number two, create the infrastructure that creates the environment. Number three, be skeptical. At least I'm skeptical about direct public investments in specific industries. I think they're hard to make and hard to make wisely.
Yeah, I would just join in here. I think that Lamar and Bill make a couple of good points. I think funding the research side and the core of what generates the inventions that then can be commercialized is a good way to look at it. You're agnostic about fields a little bit, but you're pro-research. I also think that, as Chad said, you have to have everyone with skin in the game. I mean, we've kind of been knocking around locally, nationally, putting out a $250 million drug discovery fund, where we would like to invest over the next 5 years $250 million in our drug discovery. And it's a growing part of our business. We think it's a virtuous circle, creates jobs, creates companies, and I think can replace in significant ways what we know is going to be a demanding environment in terms of fiscal situation and, frankly, accountability on the cost of education. So, you know, we're willing to kind of put skin in the game, but I think we don't want someone to tell us, oh, you're going to do this kind of research. We want to say, here's what we're really good at. We'll have skin in the game. Can industry play a partner? And obviously, I think we've got a governor who is always willing to recruit businesses to set a tone and to be a great partner. The final thing that I would say is, you know, dealing with one government is burdensome. Dealing with multiple governments is a full-time job. And so if we're going to go into partnerships, it can't be, hey, you know those reports and those regulation, those conditions that they do from Washington, and we complain about unfunded mandates? We kind of like that. And so we want to know all these other things, and we want to govern in certain ways. And so I think you've got to find what is the research enterprise, what are those areas of excellence that Jimmy and I and others can say, this is where we think we're going, what's my skin in the game, and can you forge public and private partnerships out of that, but not adding to the stack of regulations and the burdens, because, you know, we're kind of, as universities, I will say, really rabid capitalists in many ways. We're going to go get the funding and start the companies and do the partnerships everywhere. So if it's AstraZeneca, if it's Bristol Myers Squibb, that works for us. But we really would like to do it here, and we're eager for that partnership. I think it's a very good point. Questions?
My name is Brian DeBusk. I'm with DeRoyal, a Tennessee-based medical device manufacturer and also a trustee of LMU. I'm always excited when I hear about efforts to commercialize and streamline the process to get products out of the university and into the marketplace. I mean, that's part of what we do. Is it time to explore more of a free agency model, though, where the principal investigators work more closely with the grantors and even have a larger ownership stake in the intellectual property, and maybe even downsize the centralized licensing model? I know in about 2009 there was a big push, I think, that came out of Harvard looking at that model. How practical is it, and could that be the way that we streamline that process?
I guess I should answer that question, and I will, but Jeff, do you want to stand up and say something before I do?
And you'll correct him.
He forgets who signs his paycheck. Well aware of the issue. I would say there are a number of things that you have to look at in terms of what we can do better before we go to the free agency model. I think the free agency model is attractive in many ways to some. One thing I will tell you is that probably for every dollar of research, I'm putting in probably 30 cents on the dollar. And so putting on my business capitalist hat, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, well, I subsidized it all, and now I've got a bunch of free agents. Okay, so the second issue then, I think that you would probably see would be, I think you got to look at what do they really get under our formula. And we don't see the incentive about what they get. They get 40%, I get 0. And so we don't think that the issues are creating the incentives to hit it. Because if you hit it, you're going to be more than taken care of. I think what we have to do better is deal with the valley of death and crossing the valley, where we have this, and then it needs to get here. I think talking to other college presidents, the ability to move money to a growing, really high-quality tech transfer office is kind of, that's below funding research. So we're lucky. We have built up a very significant office. We have hired people from industry. The final thing I'd add is the secret sauce in this is hiring scientists who work in industry on your faculty. And so our drug discovery efforts are really led by former scientists at drug companies who are leaving because they're pulling back from that research. And so we're taking more of a lead in that. And so I think I understand the attractiveness of that. I think anyone who runs a $4 billion enterprise would say, everyone owns their own IP. I don't want to run that thing. I fund it, a large part, and we, I think, have to have better tech transfer office before we go to something, as I would say, as cat herding as that. Conflicts of interest, conflicts of commitment, there are major issues there. Jeffrey?
Before you go, let me make one real quick comment on Brian's thing. From the state standpoint, and speaking for the universities, we're going to be much more concerned about the jobs that are created rather than the revenue coming back to the universities. We're obviously interested in that, but that's a far secondary priority for us in how this is structured.
This is Jeff Balzer. He is the Vice Chancellor and Dean of our School of Medicine. And one thing I always like to point out is we're very distinctive. We own all of our hospitals and clinics at Vanderbilt, which is unusual for a School of Medicine. For example, Bill went to the Cambridge Community College of Medicine and spent time up there, and they don't own hospitals or clinics. They have good partners, right, Bill?
Yeah, they're pretty good hospitals.
Yeah. Good partners. Jeffrey?
Thank you. Actually, Nick, thanks for giving me a chance to think while you answered the question.
Yeah.
I would agree with everything Nick said. I also think that when people think about faculty doing research and what that looked like in 1970 versus what that looks like in 2013, it's changed dramatically in the degree to which the faculty research is interwoven with the resources of the institution. So if you look at R01 funding from the NIH or the NSF in 1970, an enormous percentage of it was individual faculty working in their individual laboratory, and essentially what faculty were doing was leasing space from the university. That's not the case anymore. If you look at the drug discovery effort here, if you look at the personalized medicine effort here, it involves tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure investment on the part of the university that's active and ongoing, with the faculty research built on top of that. So it's much more essential that the tech transfer offices within the university find a way to work with industry to sustain that infrastructure investment. If you look at papers that are now published in the biomedical sciences, it used to be when I was a graduate student, you were a big deal if you could publish a single author paper. That was like a home run. That's unthinkable now. And we look like physicists now. There are 25 authors on a paper. Sometimes they have to cut off the list because the journal won't put all the names on. So team science, leveraging the strengths of the institution is really how much of the best science is occurring, especially the science that's translatable to industry. So I agree with Nick, investments in making our tech transfer offices much more professional, much more easily annealed to and working with industry, I think is a big part of the solution. One of the things that we found is creating relationships. Once you do one license with a big company, everybody gets to know each other, and the next one's a lot easier. So getting started helps. If you talk to Alan Bentley, once he knows everybody at a company and we've worked through one deal, the next thing to do is a whole lot easier because people are people. And so I think success breeds success when it comes to out-licensing, and I think universities really getting serious about it, the investment in their tech transfer office is key. That's certainly what we've seen. I mean, we've done 4 times the amount of licensing in the last 6 months at Vanderbilt than we've done in any single year in our history by rebuilding that office.
Yeah, I would just also mention that we deal with really big companies, and I think the way you have to understand all of us is we can all be very bureaucratic. And if we sit down with a big drug company and Alan is sitting next to you, they kind of do this too. And so I view us as we're a big complex organization and we have little entities, we're working with big companies. How do we work better together? And you certainly have my commitment to doing that. I would also add that the deals we're seeing are more Chad-like. You know, if we sign a deal for $25 million, it's like, hey, here's $5 million to continue that research. And then it's like a foundation puts money in. Could you put money back in a Michael J. Fox Foundation so that we can fund more Parkinson's that led to the drug that is now being licensed? And then Francis Collins is putting money in from NIH. So I think a business model is developing where there's kind of multiple skin in the game, but we work at that partnership, and your point is very well taken. Well, I think we're running late here. I just want to close with one story that I had. I don't travel as much as these distinguished gentlemen, but I went to Abu Dhabi, and I ended up in a private session for about 2 hours with the Crown Prince, and he had invited us over because we have the #1 education school in the world. And he sat down with me, and we were talking, and he said, you don't know what it's like to have all these resources, 10% of the world's petroleum, natural gas, and to try to educate your people. And I looked at him and I said, you know what, with all due respect, at the time of the American Revolution, July 4th, 1776, our continent had more resources than anyone could have dreamed of. But we also had more colleges and universities than the whole British Empire. And Chad says they grow out of our soil. They really, really do. And we have to nourish that soil. And I think the comments here are very much in how do we nourish and grow out of that soil. Final point I'll make is healthcare is in the background. I mean, we do a lot of healthcare here. We have $400 million of uncompensated care. And I almost look forward to getting some Medicaid payments because it's, as I tell Lamar, it's 20 cents on the dollar rather than 0. We've got to take that issue on. We're all with big ideas on that. I feel for the governor trying to make this work, we're open to all ideas. I'm always reluctant to send something to be solved in Washington, but it may be time to turn Medicaid over there. So let's adjourn and we'll get the next panel up here. Thank you so much. Good.